Hey guys, what's up? It's Schlaw coming back to ya with a fairly belated episode of Car Rides with Schlaw. And let's hit the ground running. Let's, let's cut through the chase. Let's. I think, I think I want to talk about some concepts today, and I don't know if I'm going to remember everything I thought of beforehand, which again, still the biggest problem is not having a apparatus to directly record my thoughts. That's really the primary issue. I think the most recent thought I had is this idea about the cycling of the human condition. So, you had for a time, things started with slavery. This is regardless of what time period you look at. We were basically, most people were slaves essentially, and then I guess you had classes to some extent. I believe there were merchants who were slightly above that. And then, at the top, it was just royalty that got like everything. But the whole point is that system wasn't the most efficient for obvious reasons. So at some point, they found out that if you pay people, they work more. You get more work out of people if you pay them. Slavery, it doesn't really make any sense. It's not financially in the person's best interest. It makes more sense to pay humans a larger amount of money and then give them the autonomy to work harder and to take care of themselves, so you don't have to take care of them. Or in many cases in the past, slaves, you just wouldn't, right? And so that's no good. So in many cases you just wouldn't. Sorry, I'm just thinking about things, making sure I got everything. Whoa. I did not mean to do that. Alright, anyway. So, that brings us to that understanding and that cycle. We went from, rich people just enslaving people flat out because, why wouldn't they, really, right? Of course you couldn't expect somebody to just have compassion. It was just the way humans and I guess civilization at the time sorted itself into that kind of a way of being for whatever reason. I don't know what they were after with that, but now, then eventually, yeah, we progressed to more of a payment. And I believe this could have happened very gradually over time. I'm not entirely sure of the history, but I know initially they did pay people, but it was so low to the point where it was probably essentially slaves anyway. You paid people such a low amount of money and taxed such a high amount of it. It's that really is the same thing. But at some point, fast forward really quickly, you have places like America come into the forefront where you just let people loose, and you give people the ability You give people the ability to be arbiters of their own destiny. I don't know if I used that word right there. And this worked very well for a long time. This system of, a slaveless system and a consumerist system, essentially, where the motivating factor was consumerism. Or I guess initially, I want to say in the earlier 1900s, it was probably like the mid 1900s was the turning point. I guess there wasn't really as dramatic of a consumerist motivation in the early 1900s. I think that's pretty fair to say that there's just not as much of a motivation there. But over time that changes. It changes to there being a consumerist slant. So when, I guess at first, and I don't know if it was due to cultural degradation or just the maturing of a system, because it could just be the maturing of a system. I mean, you have to remember, in the early stage, or the more early stages of capitalism, like the first, I'm just making up a bunch of stuff here, but we're just going to assume like 1900 to 1950, and then compare that to 1950 to 2000. You really didn't have much in the sense of consumerism. I don't think there was really that much to do. I mean, I guess you could go out. They always probably had like restaurants or something that people did and stuff, but there really wasn't much to spend your money on. Obviously, food is a fairly limited, I was going to say apparatus. I don't know if that's actually. Food is a pretty limited apparatus to spend your money on. I mean, you can only go out to eat at a restaurant until you're full. If you're not hungry anymore, then you can't just keep eating, which is lesser the case nowadays with things. As there's a myriad of different purchases you can make and different temptations advertised to you basically at all times. I mean, it's so much more over-bloated. I really can't imagine there being that much temptation for a person in the year 1900 to 1950. I think it was so much easier to just walk a straight path. I mean, if you wanted to be rich, it was probably just either in a wholesome way or in like just a weirdly greedy way, like you wanted to be like a criminal, essentially. I don't really know why else you would have even had those kind of desires at that time. So, yeah, it's just like, I don't know. So that's a little bit weird. Again, it's hard to kind of say this stuff. I'm not going to say my finger is on the pulse completely with this, but I would assume I'm loosely correct with it just being like life in that time in the early to mid 1900s. There really just wasn't that much temptation. There may have been the emergence of little things, maybe some toys emerging. Yeah, like, some toys enter the market and some like, oh, now there's like a television, now there's a microwave, right? But really, you're not seeing homes and you're not seeing people like spending out the gazoo. You're just not seeing that. I don't think to the same degree. I really believe most of that really ramped up in like the um, maybe the 50s and maybe the 60s and 70s, and obviously the 80s is really, I'm assuming, when consumer spending really started to skyrocket. So yeah, I don't know. It's a difference in culture for sure, because before that you had more of a moral or an ethic to saving. This rant's kind of boring, so let's just cut to the chase. Rant's getting a little bit stale. It's been stale, but I guess I felt like it was a necessary prerequisite to get to what I was talking about, but maybe it isn't. I don't even know. I just thought it was, but now we're like 10 minutes in, and I just thought it was like a worthy prepper, but maybe it's not really my expertise, so maybe I should just keep my mouth shut. Who knows? Anyways, that brings us to now, where you're seeing that the over materialization of things starts to cause problems. I've brought this up before. Now this person decides, instead of having a child, they're just going to get a BMW. And in the short term, it's a great decision with basically with actually an upside. So, prior to now, you had humanity operating at its automatic state, which is without any distraction, you're going to reproduce and presumably reproduce as much as possible. But once you start to orchestrate this system of temptation, you're opening up, like, people are not going to do that anymore, because they can see and calculate, hey, like, if I don't have a kid, my life is going to be better than this other person's life, at least in the short term, right? Because in the short term, you're going to have a lot of extra money, and you're going to be able to get these nicer things that society flashes in front of your eyes, at a near constant basis once you're in adulthood. So I really think that's how, I guess that's how people roll. I don't know. And so now you have like a different incentive, and it scrambles everything, and then, that happened. It happened. And now we're paying for the side effect of that, which is you have way more old people than you do young people. So a lot of these systems that we thought were always going to be the case, basically retirement, are now not. And honestly, you could make the argument that it was because I've mentioned before, I think on a walk switch Schlaw, my theory is that what's happening now is mostly just a result of very poor calculus on a human's part. So, like, in essence, I think there should have been a slight regulation to reproductive rates during the 1900s, and that would be solving many problems that we now face, because we kind of know now that you would want, you can't just have an explosion in population. If you have that, in the short term, it's really good, and then in the long term, it's going to be very difficult to maintain that level of explosive growth, and then you're going to come down with a ton of problems. So I wouldn't say that it needed to be like an aggressive limitation, but there definitely should have been a slight limitation on reproduction back in the 1900s. Now, nowadays, we're at a crossroads. So basically, there was an reproduction, and you may just like think, oh, well, now let's just do an under reproduction to like counter that out. No, that's dangerous. Like, you see what the problem is? That's dangerous. And I think the truth is humans are just not ready to have this conversation. So they just kept putting it off and kicking the stone down the road. Kicking the can, no, not kicking it. I think it is kicking the stone. I thought, or maybe it's kicking the can. Oh, I forget what GPT said. That's silly. I forget which one the phrase is. But that's basically what humans did. I mean, and that's what they do with everything, right? They just keep, if it still works, just keep pushing it until it breaks. That's like, humanity's motto, apparently. And so, yeah, we're in this really difficult crossroads that, let me guess, many people don't even care about or think about. Many people nowadays still just want to have kids and don't really think about the calculation or the numbers behind it. I think it's disgraceful, but it's like, what can you do? I mean, humans have their own thoughts about things, and yeah, it is what it is. So we're kind of in that crossroads now, and you're starting to see the effects of a over-materialized and over-consumptive society. Now, granted, many of these people in later life get hit pretty hard if you don't have a kid, because ideally your child can take care of you when you're later in life, and it's somebody that you know. Nowadays, you just ship a bunch of people off to a nursing home where there's some super rich person making a ton of money off of them, off of, your negligence, essentially. And it's perpetuating more inequality, whereas if you didn't do that and just did the old-fashioned way of just having the parents stay in the house with you, then you're cutting that out of the equation, and you're keeping less money in business. But now what happens is now there's like every little thing you have to buy, because that's kind of how we're set up. You don't really have a good relationship with your family anymore, and you have to pay someone to do everything. Like, you can't just have your grandmom watch your kid anymore, because your grandmom, bed rotted on TikTok her whole life, so now she has poor mobility and no strength to take care of a child, no wisdom to pass on. And so now you have to pay for a babysitter or somebody to watch them who is good enough or is sufficient and didn't do that. And so that's another perpetuation of inequality. What is all this the result of? It's the result of a freedom ideology, an ideology of freedom. And ultimately, freedom has a very fast growth and a very quick death. And I don't know if everybody was conscious of this in the 1900s. They probably weren't. They just thought anti-freedom was pretty scary, And I think that's about it. That's probably what went through people's minds. People couldn't think that far ahead. And losing their freedom was probably a scary idea. But like I said, there's a lot of things that we would be in so much better condition if people would have really thought about this stuff. And I have a feeling some people did, but it is possible that most people just didn't even really know. That is entirely possible, that just... A lot of people just had no idea. They couldn't really see into the future that far, which is why now I'm trying to see into the future like as far as I can and try testing as much of these ideas as possible. Because that's really where we're at. And this is how everybody needs to be thinking. Absolutely, this is how everybody should be and needs to be thinking for the impending crisis that we have. But the common denominator is a freedom ideology. And it shows that humans through freedom lead to destruction because it is essentially adjacent to chaos. Freedom and chaos go hand in hand. And what I've found, or what my theory is that there's no good that comes from chaos. It's impossible to have a good-natured chaos. But order exists on two axes. You could be organized good or organized evil. For example, you could have somebody who's evil and they're intentionally evil, or you could have somebody who is evil but they're ignorantly evil. And those are obviously two very different things. But ultimately, ignorant good is nearly impossible. It's almost just completely impossible. I don't believe that the chaos good is a possible outcome. So in order to have a positive outcome, I think you have to have order. You can't have a lack of order and have a good outcome. It's just not. Doing the right thing, it takes calculation. It takes a certain effort. It just, there's something to that. Because the thing I think of is, well, let's think about ignorant good, what that would look like. Giving a homeless person $20. But then there's no way to regulate whether, okay, well, what's he doing with that money? You see what I mean? That's kind of like an ignorant good. And you can see how that really doesn't work. If you want to actually do something good, it has to be planned. You can't be ignorant. You have to do the correct action. It's just how it has to be. And this is my theory, but it could be slightly wrong, but I think for the most part it's correct, which is how you see there's only a quarter, of those four options, only one of them is actually good. So it's only a quarter of potential outcomes. I'm sure that's not how they land, but you get what I mean. Because you can make a calculated decision and it can be horrible. You can also make a calculated decision and it can be good. But most likely, if you make an uncalculated decision, it's most likely bad. So the most common outcome for human decisions is bad. And it really holds us back a lot. Now, it's possible, I'm not saying it's entirely impossible for there to be a chaotic good outcome. It's just very rare. It's just unlikely. Because, I don't know. It's just kind of rare that would occur, but it's possible. So I guess I shouldn't say chaotic good is impossible, but it's leaving things up to chance, which is very risky and likely. You're going to push your luck eventually. And that's kind of what's happened with humanity. At some point, you're going to be wrong. That's the whole point. Someday things are going to catch up to you. You're just going to be wrong. That's the truth of it. So that's where we're at. And now 25 minutes into the episode, maybe I'll finally talk about what I wanted to talk about originally. I don't really know why I'm even acting like this, honestly. It's kind of silly, but, you know. Whoa. Guy really cut me close. Happens a lot. People try to pass you and they really do it aggressively and unnecessarily. Makes things way unnecessarily risky for no reason. And you wonder, like, if it's really, I mean, because you don't even know how these situations are going to go down, so. Yeah, I could say it's his fault, but he could just say it's not his fault, and then what do you do? Like, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Wait till cameras are on everything. Then we'll know whose fault it is. Anyways, we're finally at the point we're at now, which is we're kind of inverting back into a slave-like system. There's, the middle class is slipping away, and you now basically just have an upper and lower class, except that is a smaller percentage, the upper class. It's a smaller percentage, it's a richer group. I think right now it's probably technically not that extreme, but it kind of is. I mean, but I'm saying there's probably like an upper 20%, if I'm going to be honest. There's still probably like an upper 20% or 15% of Americans who are like very well off. So it's not like that condensed yet, but I think someday it will be. It'll be like, 5% or even 1% or even, 0.5%. Or, I'm not going to keep, but you get the point. And then everybody else is just lower class. They're just, they're just out of luck. That is how it's going to look, I think. I think that's like a very accurate prediction. But here's the thing. This adjustment, it could actually make sense. And I was just realizing this morning, because you don't really need like, what's the whole issue here? The whole issue here is material abundance. That's what I just pointed out, how it's like the overconsumption culture and all these things, that's the whole problem. So if we had a society where you were only paid as much as you needed to be paid, that would definitely be a better system than what we have now, because people would be less distracted by the materialism because they wouldn't even have the option. The vanity, the things like that. It actually makes like a lot of sense if you think about it. I didn't really think about it, but why would that kind of a system make less sense? To only be paid as much as like just like the bare minimum, so you can't really do anything. But that actually makes like more sense, because then it's more likely. Now, obviously some pretty major adjustments would need to be made to incentivize reproduction and childcare kind of stuff. Like the government would have to get organized in that way. Oh wait, sorry, I don't have to merge it. It's been a bit since I've driven through here. Incentivized. Yeah, they'd have to make some adjustments, obviously, to the idea. But I think in simple terms, the way things are shaping out, it actually makes like a lot of sense. Because the truth is, like, we saw what freedom did, and it just created a lot of like really selfish people, and in a lot of cases ignorantly selfish people. Like, it wasn't really, I don't know how productive it was for humanity. I guess it allowed us to get to this point, and we're still kind of riding that wave. And I guess the elite's idea would be the hope that technology is going to improve fast enough to just capitalize on the hyper growth that we've seen, and then, you know, it'll be all good. You know, I think that's the idea, because once the tech is set up, then things will be a much better situation. And that's kind of been the idea, I think. All right, time to get gas. I will be right back.
Less than a mile away at CVS. Mueller's the trusted leader in sports medicine. Head down the road to find Mueller braces and supports at CVS today.
I'll check out this week's top trending music videos on Loop TV. Doritos Golden Sriracha inside now. Spicy, but not too spicy.
Getting your flu shot at CVS matters. Because we'll work around the most important schedule. Yours.
Join the best soccer league in the world.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Schlaw coming back to with another episode of Our Eyes with Schlaw. Dude, I feel like people, but they didn't even know what I was doing this whole time. Like, seriously. See, my car can gently muscle over the curb. Oh, good. Anyways. Where were we? Talking about some stuff. Definitely we were talking about something, that's for sure. Trying to think though, what would we have been, what were we talking about? What were we talking about? What were we talking about? Oh. Yeah, so it kind of makes sense, right? Because you think about it, and what is, like, you don't really need, well, it really comes down to human autonomy and like freedom and stuff like that. You don't need motivation. What is the point of motivation? I mean, people who, I think they claim that as like an argument that, oh well, if you didn't have autonomy, certain people wouldn't work or something. But again, you can eliminate that even as being a motivating um, concept, I believe. Like, it's not like you. I mean, the system I'm talking about is everybody has a brain chip, and then you're just told what you would be best at and what would be best for you and stuff like that. And so you don't really like pick your job or have to figure out your job. You just do your job. Like, you're told what your job is going to be, and you just follow it. And yeah, like, again, people get worried about the loss of autonomy or whatever, but I don't know. I mean, why wouldn't you be motivated to do the perfect thing? It's like that uncanny like human feeling where humans, like, they don't like being told what to do. Like, they like to choose for themselves what they're going to do. But really, that, I mean, to me it sounds selfish. It sounds selfish to me. It sounds like a selfish species. And so I don't know. That's what it would appear to be to me, as a species that, you know, is just selfish. That's all it really is. I don't remember what we were talking about, sorry. A species, a self-centered species, but there's so many things I could have been talking about with that. That's a shame. I wish I had the transcriber, but I've been kind of lazy and not setting that up. So, can't check to see what I was talking about actually, sadly. But it would have taken a while to transcribe all that anyway. I really need to look into the live transcriber. That would be a godsend. We'll see. We'll see if I get there. But it would be a godsend. Oh yeah, I remember. Okay, so yeah, they're selfish because like almost everybody I've ever met is like that. Like, they don't like to be told what to do. And it's, I mean, what is it? It's just like bratty behavior. Like, it's like people never grew up past being a teenager. You know what I'm saying? Like, what else is that? I mean, it's just so stupid. Like, if somebody tells you to do something and it makes sense, I would want to do it. Now, again, there's a key thing there. Now, if somebody's telling you to do something and doesn't make sense, of course that's crazy. But here's the thing. I think what happens is everybody assumes that their own logic is correct, when most people are actually really stupid and wrong. So in my case, I tend to try a lot to look at things like objectively, and I know I probably missed the mark. I'm well aware of that, but the whole point is I'm pretty sure that I spend a lot more time reflecting and just trying to think about these things and understand these things than like a lot of other people. So the outcome of that is a much more logical logic. There's probably a better way to say that, but it's a much more logical logic. And so that there's some times when people tell me to do something and I'm like, yeah, of course. Like that makes a ton of sense. But then there could be other times somebody's telling me to do something and I'm like, forget that. Like that's not a good idea. And I could explain to the person why, but they're probably not going to listen. It's kind of like the whole thing that goes on, and it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy how much people like don't listen, right? So that's kind of my point with that, and how like stupid that behavior is, and how it's like, no, it's not about just blindly obeying authority. That's not what I'm saying to do at all. I mean, that has issues as well, but it's about blindly obeying a correct authority. That's really going to be the paradigm shift. And I think that with a system like I've talked about, it's going to be the first opportunity for humanity to obey a tangible, infallible authority. Because up until this point, that hasn't really been the case. Now, of course, what I assume would be the case is you would still have some humans monitoring things. You wouldn't just have like an overarching AI just like dictating everything blind, and there would probably, because again, there are still going to be elite humans. I don't think it's possible to just be like, there's no more elite humans. Yeah, try again. You know what I mean? Like we're going to have elites. It's not going to be I don't think it's possible for like a absolute equality. It's definitely possible for like a most authority. Like most of us, or what am I what am I talking like? It's definitely possible for a system where most of us are equal, but like I don't know that it makes any sense to have zero leadership. It seems crazy. I mean, it's possible that it's not. I'm not going to like, I don't know. Like I'm not going to, I mean, maybe we would get to a point where it would just make more sense to have an absolute AI like making all the decisions for us because of how terrible we are at making decisions. I'm just assuming we would still kind of have this council or something overlooking the AI. It's just a theory of mine. I don't know. Not a ton of thought has been put into that yet, but if I really had to make like a guessing assumption about it, that really would be my guessing assumption. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I got. That's what I got at this point. So, interesting, isn't it? All right. Well, let's get ready to go in. Another day of work, sadly, because I'm really not done talking. I have a lot more to talk about. Hopefully, I'll remember to talk about it, during the walks with Schlaws and stuff. But, yep, I'm really being siphoned off here. Because I have to participate in this broken system that don't work. Don't work. I just like ruined the audio for that episode. Yeah, it's crazy. Alright. Anyways, it has been Schlaw, but now it's time to buy Schlaw. So, see you, Schlaw.